Welcome. In this session, I'm going to begin with a new chapter, Plant Kingdom. So, under this, first I'm going to discuss the types of classification systems, and then we will move on to see further classification within this kingdom. Let's begin this session with types of classification systems. So, there are three types of classification systems. One, it is artificial system of classification, and then the next one, natural system of classification, and then lastly, phylogenetic system of classification. So these are three types of classification systems. We know that the classifications are not permanent and they go on changing from time to time. Okay, so here the earlier scientists, so they tried to classify the plants based on the external features. So because in those days they used to have very simple microscopes and were not able to see what is present inside the plants, so they did not consider the internal structure of the plant, and they have considered only the external features of the plants, and based on that they have classified those plants. So and because of that we call that system of classification as artificial classification, and in course of time the artificial classification was replaced with natural classification, and then that also been replaced with the phylogenetic system of classification. And we know that every classification is based on certain right criteria. So there is a basis on which we need to classify. So we will see what is the criteria they have considered in case of artificial system of classification, and then what is the basis for natural system of classification, and lastly we'll also see about the phylogenetic, okay, system of classification. So first one, we'll see about artificial system of classification, where, okay, so on what basis they classified the plants. So here scientists in those days they considered gross superficial morphological characters. So they considered gross superficial morphological characters. Okay, so I told you that in those days the microscopes were not so developed. Okay, and people, that is scientists, they used to see only the external features, and based on that they used to classify the plants. So that is the gross means overall, superficial, okay, the structure and form. So here the morphology, which means the structure and form of the plants they used to consider, and then they used to classify. So let's see here what are all those gross morphological, I mean superficial morphological characters. Like they used to consider the habit, and okay, the color, then the number and shape of leaves, etc. So these are the gross superficial morphological characters they used to consider. So it means only the external features. No, it means whether what the cell wall is made up of, and what are all the organelles present inside, and composition. So they did not consider okay any internal structure. So only they have considered gross superficial morphological characters. Okay, right. And here it's the lineage classification. So here the lineage classification is last of artificial classifications. Means his classification uh, is the last classification under artificial system of classification. Okay, even though it is an artificial system of classification, here Linnaeus considered few characters. So he considered few characters on reproductive or reproduction of the plants. That is, he considered androecium. So here he not only considered the vegetative characters, okay, plus on androecium also he considered. So here he classified the plants based on vegetative characters and on, okay, androecium. So here this artificial system of classification, so that is, it is mainly based on vegetative characters. So whatever I have taken here, so these are all the vegetative characters. Okay, right. So these are vegetative characters, and this artificial system of classification, it has given equal weightage. So this system, okay, gives equal weightage. It gives equal weightage to vegetative and sexual characters. So it has given equal weightage to vegetative and sexual characters of the plants. But the point is, the vegetative characters will go on changing according to the environmental conditions. So hence, later the scientists have understood, and then in course of time, okay, so this artificial system of classification they stopped using. So of course now no one in the world scientists use this artificial system of classification, and in course of time this artificial system of classification was replaced with natural system of classification. Okay, so the next one we'll see about the natural system of classification. Right. So coming to this natural system of classification, so this is based on natural affinities. So it is based on natural affinities. So which means the natural similarities, okay, among the organisms, among the organisms. Okay, so based on natural affinities among the organisms. So that is the basis for this natural system of classification. And this natural system of classification, it not only, right, considered external characters, so it considered both external and internal features. So I told you, in case of artificial classifications, they did not include the internal features of organisms. Okay, but the natural system of classification, it included external as well as internal features. Okay, so what internal features they have considered? So internal features like ultrastructure. Okay, so the ultrastructure means in detail what it is made up of. Okay, how is the cell wall, and okay, the cell membrane, and what the cell organelles, what they are made up of, and I mean what how they are composed of and all. So that is ultrastructure. So they considered the ultrastructure, and then they also considered the anatomy. Okay, so this anatomy means what kind of tissues they have, right? So this comes as internal morphology. So internal morphology. So of course we divide this morphology into external morphology and internal morphology. So this internal morphology is called anatomy. So the types of tissues, what they are present and all, that comes under this anatomy. Okay, so they have considered anatomy also, and then even they have considered embryology. So embryology is study of embryos. So how embryos are developing. Okay, so yeah, of course here as I'm talking about the plant classification, so I tell that how embryos in plants they are developing and what is all. So that comes under this embryology. They even consider this embryology, and then phytochemistry. Okay, so this phytochemistry has the chemical substances that make a plant. So what are all those chemical substances that okay make a plant, that comes under phytochemistry. So this phytochemistry, embryology, anatomy, and then ultrastructure of plant cells. So all these they have considered. So they come under internal features. So not only they have considered the external features, but they also have considered these internal features, and then they have classified the plants. And with these external and internal features, okay, the scientists like George Bentham and Joseph Dalton Hooker. So these two persons, so George Bentham and Joseph, okay, Dalton Hooker. So these two persons have classified, okay, based on this, that is external and internal feature. So their classification, so natural system of classification, so is they have given by this George Bentham and Joseph Dalton Hooker. So their system of classification is natural system of classification, is natural system of classification. Okay, so in simple we call Bentham and Hooker system of classification. So Bentham and Hooker system of classification is a natural system of classification because they have included the internal structures also. So I hope now you have understood that artificial system of classification, it included only the external, or that is the gross superficial morphological characters only, right? Okay, and coming to this natural, we included even internal features. So that is ultrastructure of the cell. Okay, so what are all the cell organelles in detail structure of the cell, we call it ultrastructure. Then anatomy, we have taken the tissues, okay, the cells, what they are, okay, all that is anatomy. Under the anatomy they come. Then embryology, the how embryos, okay, development takes place, all that comes under embryology. So phytochemistry, whatever that chemical substances present in the plant, so phytochemistry, all these they have considered in natural system of classification. Okay, and the natural system of classification, okay, and then uh, the system of classification, this okay, slowly this also has been modified. and then now we follow phylogenetic system of classification. So phylogenetic system of classification. So this is a recent system of classification, and this is based on evolutionary relationships. So is based on evolutionary relationships. So uh, now we understand when we compare with the artificial system of classification, okay, so only the superficial characters, then natural superficial as well as internal, and in this case phylogenetic system of classification, okay, so we include, okay, all those external, internal, and including this phylogenetic relationships. And so this system of classification, so this assumes that organisms belonging to the same taxa, so organisms belonging to same taxa have common ancestor, have common ancestor, right? So like for example, if I take Solanum tuberosum, okay, so this is right, one species, and then Solanum nigrum, and then Solanum melongena. Okay, so these are three different species, and they all, you can see here, belong to, okay, the genus Solanum. And we believe that this Solanum tuberosum, nigrum, and Solanum melongena, okay, they evolved from one common organism. So that is called the common ancestor. Okay, so that common ancestor, it got diversified to form three different species. Okay, so that is organisms belonging to same taxa have common ancestor. Okay, is the criteria actually what they have considered. So that is the phylogenetic system of classification. Right now, information from other sources is also important in the classification. Okay, so here especially the information from other sources, it is very important when there is no supporting fossil evidence. So what we mean by that, okay, fossil evidence, so fossils are, okay, the dead remains that have been preserved for a very long time. So when these fossils are not available, it is very quite difficult to come to know their ancestry, so from where they have evolved. So I told you already uh, in the beginning of okay, uh, that every species on this planet is connected to one another. So the first group of organisms, they have diversified to give, okay, all the species on this planet. So I told you that kingdom Monera, it diversified to give Protista, and Protista, it diversified and gave fungi, plantae, and animalia. And within this, okay, kingdoms also, different organisms, they diversified and resulted in the formation of millions of species on this planet Earth. Okay, so here, when supporting fossils are not available, okay, so when supporting fossil evidence is not available, okay, so here the fossil evidence is a direct evidence, and we can easily come to know, okay, what is its ancestry. Now when such supporting fossil is not available, we need to rely on some other okay methods to classify the organisms. So what they are, so they are like numerical taxonomy, and then like chemo I'm sorry, okay, chemo taxonomy, and then cyto taxonomy. We'll take chemo. Okay, so numerical taxonomy, chemo taxonomy, and cytotaxonomy. So these are, okay, three modes of taxonomy that actually help in classifying the organisms when there is no fossil evidence available. Okay, right. So it means that these are all indirect evidences. So basing on this numerical taxonomy, then chemotaxonomy, and means the similarities we see between the organisms, especially the plants. So cytotaxonomy, comparing, okay, the whatever that plant we think might have given to the different, that is ancestor. So comparing that, the cytotaxonomy with the present plants, then chemotaxonomy, and even the numerical taxonomy. By considering all these, we will be able to classify the organisms. Especially the plants here I'm talking about. Okay, so now coming to numerical taxonomy. So here in numerical taxonomy, right, a number and code, a number and a code is assigned to every character. So they are going to give a number and a code. So we need not know what a number and what is the code they give to each of those characters. Okay, so just remember that they will be giving a number and a code to each of those characters. Okay, so here of course those all characters are observable characters. So all those are observable characters. They are going to consider all those observable characters, and they give certain numbers and codes to them. And all this information, so all this information, right, is stored in computers. Okay, so they are stored in computers because they will be considering a large number of characters. Okay, and it is very quite difficult to do it manually. Okay, so taking the papers and then, okay, seeing the characters with the numbers and all, so it's very difficult, okay, to do it manually. So hence what they are doing is, so they assign a number and then assign a code to that, and then feed that into the computer and ask the computer to analyze, okay, the similarities, okay, between two different plants. Then the computer will do it automatically and will come up with a conclusion, right? So this is the numerical taxonomy, right? So one more point here. So in this numerical taxonomy, each character is given equal importance. So each character is given equal importance, and also at same time hundreds of characters can be analyzed. So because the computers will do that, so at a time, so hundreds of characters can be analyzed. Next one, coming to chemotaxonomy. So this one considers, okay, the chemical composition of plants. So it consists, okay, so it considers chemical composition of plants, means what the cell wall is made up of, cellulose, hemicellulose, okay, suberin, lignin, like this it goes on. So what kind of materials they are present, that is chemical substances present in the plant cells. Okay, so it considers that chemical composition of plants. Okay, so considers the chemical composition of plants. And then coming to cytotaxonomy. So this cytotaxonomy, that is based on cytological information. So it is based on cytological information. Right, so inside the cell, what it has, the vacuoles, okay, or the chloroplast. Right, we know the presence of chloroplast is a feature that we see in case of plants and not in case of animals. Okay, so the cytological information also will help in classifying the plants. And this, in short, I'll call it cell biology. Okay, so this is, these are the three modes of taxonomy that will be used if there is no supporting evidence is available. Okay, right. So that is right about types of classification systems we have seen, right. With this, I will end this session, and in the next, that is in tomorrow's session, we will see the different groups of plants, that will be algae, the bryophytes, the pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and then angiosperms. So we'll discuss about those groups individually and see the examples, and even the characters, and then examples of each and every group.